I'm going to show you how I'm migrating my existing functions that use Prisma to both Prisma and Drizzle support. Of course, this is not always a real world scenario, but in my case, it is because I want to move away from Prisma for serverless deployments, but keeping Prisma where I need them in some projects. So in every project that I create, I can decide whether to use Prisma or Drizzle. So in my case, let's say that I have this roles DB file, and it depends on this Prisma client role type. So this is tightly coupled with Prisma. What I want to do is implement another way with the repository pattern by creating an interface for the data access and the functions. Like here we will have get, and this will return a promise of role model. So we need to create this model in another directory and file. Um, so we will have role model somewhere in models, and maybe the inside the domain like roles. And then we can almost copy and paste whatever it's implemented here, but change it to role Prisma DB. And this will implement this interface, iRoleDB, and then create another one for the new ORM that you are implementing, in my case, Drizzle. And this way, we are bringing the existing functionality, but extending it to more ORM support. So their models are not tied to Prisma anymore. And finally, we need some roles, tests, DB test or tests, I don't know, file where you will need to make sure that the previous functionality works, but also the new functionality. Let me make myself smaller. And yeah, I'm going to show you how this looks in my code. So starting with the schema, I'm going to go to app db config Prisma. And here we have domains, schema domains or domains schemas. And on permissions, I have this role model. So the first thing that I need to do is create this role model type, so I don't depend on the Prisma client, a specific one. And if I have something like extending or joining from other tables, like in this case, I can create DTOs and specify it here, like this role with permissions DTO will contain an array of permissions that go to the role permission model and brings the permission object. So why am I supporting both Prisma and Drizzle models? I mean, how do I sync my database? In my case, I run this command npx drizzle git introspect, but you can build your schema from scratch with Drizzle, especially if it's really simple. And it will generate these two files, relations and schema. But like I said, I already made some changes. Like for example, I don't want to use timestamp for dates. So if I undo my changes, you can see that I use dates because I want to support Prisma and Drizzle, and the compatibility between date and timestamp will need to be manually, and I don't want that because timestamp is a string. So anyway, now if I go to the roles DB server file, I have some functions that are already defined what the return type is. So I need to make sure that here I don't depend on anything from Prisma. So like for example here, this will essentially become the new Prisma implementation. So let's go to my interfaces. I already have user, tenant, tenant user, and so on. Let's define one for iRole DB TS export interface iRole DB, And I can actually copy everything from here and replace export async function to just yeah, delete it, because this will not be the implementation. I will need to import this from the models and remove the specific implementation, because this is the interface. So I don't need to return anything. And here, and do the same thing for every function. You see how I'm using Cashified here? That will not be called inside database calls. That will go into another file called roles service, and I don't think I have that. Roles service. Yeah, I already have that. So the specific cached or caching implementations will go here. I just have these set user roles functions, and actually let me refactor this, because I made a Twitter poll where I said, what do you want? What do you prefer, named exports or default exports? And all the votes went from for named exports. So instead of calling it like roles service that and then the function, just call the function set user roles, and these, instead of importing, I'm just gonna replace it like this and do the same thing for this one. Remove the role service. So this way you know what specific function you need for this file. So going back to the interface, I also need to import this DTO and this role model. And let's do it like this so it's easier. I'm sure there must be an easier way than this, but I can see things like the cachified method that I need to think for later. Now for deleting, I don't return anything. Prisma returns the object, but Drizzle doesn't. So we need to put some ambiguous or something that applies to both. And in this case, we don't have the promise. For updates, it's the same. We don't return anything. We assume that it's found. And here, for creating, we return a string of the created item. Again, Prisma returns the whole object, which is convenient, but Drizzle doesn't. It returns, I think, the affected queries or rows, something like that. So we already have the interface, and we need to create the specific one for Prisma. I have a repositories folder inside DB for that, and here I roles DB Prisma DB, and this will be a class that implements I roll DB. Oops, it shouldn't be roles. It should be singular. Yeah. So we need to implement this interface. But what I can do is remove all of this and copy and paste whatever I already had here. So here I can find and replace all my export async function to just async and see what I need. Well, in my case, it's no longer DB, because before DB meant Prisma, but now I have a DB for Drizzle. If I do this, DB Drizzle, I mean Drizzle DB or Prisma. So I need to make sure that for this implementation, I don't call DB, but Prisma dot. And now for the cachified functions, I'm gonna move this to the roles service because it has some logic upon the function. That's why I'm moving it away. And here it will not be the implementation from Prisma. It will call the repository interface. Let me show you what I mean. So return cachified, but here instead of calling Prisma role find many, we should already have DB, which comes from this DB, and we need to create this role here, I role DB, and implement it on every ORM. Like for example, for Prisma, it will create a new role Prisma. Didn't I call it? Yeah, I call it incorrectly. It shouldn't have this I at the beginning because it's not an interface, it's an implementation. So it should be role Prisma DB. And for Drizzle, role Drizzle DB. And well, for mock, I'm just gonna throw a not implemented exception. And I'm gonna create this empty Drizzle file. Export class implements I role DB. And I will implement this later. So import the Drizzle one, and it says that this file is not correctly implemented because I still have some errors. So I need to remove this cachified and just return whatever it is from Prisma directly, because this will be abstracted in roles services. And what else? Here we can import Prisma because it's a Prisma specific implementation. And create role also handles something with cache, also update role and delete role. So I guess all of this can move away also to roles services. Well, before on the get all roles without permissions, it's no longer find many, it's get all roles without permissions. We will change this later to remove the roles word because it's like redundant, and we don't have the where like this. We pass the type, and I think that's it. We can remove this specific Prisma specific. Yeah, we don't need this where. So here we're just abstracting this function so we can cache it. I need to make sure to whatever I call this function, like in admin data, I'm not calling it from this previous file, roles server, but from roles services. And do the same thing for here. And finally, I can remove or comment all of this implementation because it should work with the new implementation, but I need to make sure that it works. So going back to these functions, I can copy this and paste it here and export those async functions. Export async function. And instead of having to call Prisma, here we're gonna call the DB, and the interface changes. It's no longer, I mean, function name, it's create role, and the data, I think it goes here. Yeah. And then it clears the cache. So do the same thing for the other ones. Update role, and the ID goes here, and then the data goes there. Here it should return the type. Okay, so after we update the role, or I think, because here it should clear the cache on the previous type, I think, or on the new type. I think on both. So I'm gonna put data type and then the previous type. So we're gonna get the previous or item because it's not actually previous, it's the current one that it's updating. And this is void, so we're not actually returning anything. And finally, the delete role from DB, where ID, it doesn't return anything, and we're gonna also get the item here so we can clear the type. And it's delete role. So what I can do is, because I have these two functions that is called the same, I can go to my roles interface and rename everything from here, but I don't want to do this right now, but after everything works. So the duplicates will be fixed later. Now, going back to the role Prisma implementation, I need to make sure to not call these cache things. Okay, here we have to define that after creating the role, it should return a string. So we get the item and return the item ID. And for update, we're not going to return anything, and we're going to remove the clear cache key. So we need to define here promise void, and also for the deletion, not returning anything, and clear the cache key. So yeah, now I need to make sure to call this new implementation. So going to my code base, I need to find whenever is called these functions, like get all roles. One way to do it is go function by function, or find the specific file that is calling all your previous functions and fix them. In this case, get all roles is not cachified, so it's already on the DB. So I'm just gonna delete this and go here and call it like this: DB role get all roles. And since I'm going to do this everywhere, I can do this: await, find and replace. Move this like this. Yeah, just like that. And move on to the next one. In this case, it's just deleting this file. Also here. I guess the function that was called the most, it was that one. Get all roles names. This one is not cached, so it comes from DB. And going to the next one, we don't have the DB imported, so we just need to make sure to import it. And remember, this DB is the one that contains all your interfaces. In my case, the iRole DB. And what else? We're almost finished, so we can almost delete this file. Now this delete, get, and update role, well, not the get role, but delete and update comes from the roles service file. So update and get role comes from DB role. DB role. Okay. And similar to here, create role comes from role services because it touches the cache, but these ones come from the database directly. DB role. And here I can find, whenever I'm calling create role, to see if I'm requiring the role object, because before it was returning the object, but now it's returning the ID. In this case is simple because I'm just using the ID. But in this case, I'm returning the role that is created, but why? Oh, no problem. I don't need to return anything because it's just an await that it's not wrapped into anything. Get role by name. It will call db role get role by name. Get role is my db. Okay, this is a problem because the permissions current implementation depends on Prisma and on the previous implementation. So I cannot replace this previous DB, which is not my interface, it's my repository partner, is my previous way of accessing Prisma data, which is on utils DB server. So a quick fix is I'm gonna import DB as DB2 from DB and use this DB2. And then when I'm finished migrating permissions, I can come back, and after I delete this file, I can replace DB2 to DB. And okay, so what else? Get all roles, similar to here. Seed service depends on DB, which is a Prisma client. So in this case, we also need to do DB as DB2 from DB. This is like a step, a middle step. Admin role. Users find many. Why is this? Okay, so seed roles is the actual error. We need to call DB role to DB2 role, and create role. We need to import that from role services. And admin role is no longer well, in this case, it returns a string or an object. This is an error. Sometimes it returns an object and it shouldn't. So admin roles, let me see the implementation of these seed roles. It should only return a string, an array of strings. But what if I'm requiring the role? Yeah, no, I'm just using the role ID. So I'm gonna rename this to role ID, and on this case also admin role ID because it's a string. And we're gonna return the ID, but it sometimes return the existing. So in this case, it's the existing ID. Okay, I think we can now run well, let me see if I'm using this file in other places. Get all roles comes from db role get roles. Remove that file. Okay, I think this is the final one. Now we can go to the interface and replace with the correct names. Like instead of db role get role, go here. And well, before doing that, I'm gonna run npm run type check just to make sure that I didn't break in any other places. And you should do this too, because even though I search file by file, you may forget some others like this one. Get role by name. So I can confidently delete this roles db server and db role get role by name. Here we also need the db2, db as db2 from db. Okay, now we can rename all of this with the correct names. Instead of get all roles, it's just get all. And get all roles names, it's get all names. Get all roles without permissions, remove roles, and get roles by or in IDs. Instead of get role, it's just get. I mean, this should have been get in IDs, get all in IDs. Get role by name, get by name. Get next roles order, get next available order. How do you type available? Available order. Create, just create. Update role, just update, and delete. I'm not gonna use delete because this is a reserved word in TypeScript or Node. So just del. If you see Stripe SDK, they use del for the similar functionality. Now, I think we can now create the test file. So I'm just gonna go to my tests and copy and paste it, the user one that I already have. So replace this to role and replace this to role. And I think I can leverage ChatGPT or Claude for this. I can say, well, this is my way of doing it. I'm gonna copy all the user tests that I have, and then copy the user DB Prisma that I have, and user Drizzle. So as context, so it understands my way of calling Prisma and Drizzle and defining my tests. So now implement my roles DB test file, which should test this interface. So role DB. This is the Prisma implementation example. Role Prisma. So hopefully on the first try, it will generate correctly all the necessary tests for each function. So before every, well, we don't need this because in user, this is actually commented. So I'm gonna comment this. Create many, get all names, create many. Okay, so it's doing it correctly. And I know that I need to create mock data for my roles. So somewhere here, I'm gonna add role model and add super fake data, like the ID will be 1, name will be 1, I mean role 1. And I'm actually gonna copy and paste this and replace it one by one. It's gonna be 1, new date, the name, role 1, description 1, type, this is gonna be admin, assigned to new users, true is default true, order 1, well, false. False seems like a better option for defaults. And create another role in case I want to test functions that require 2 roles and order 2. So going back to my roles DB test file, let's see if ChatGPT completed. Copy code and comment this before each. And here it shouldn't return the ID. This is the item, so it's like this. It made a mistake, similar to here. Now we can run npx by test, the ones that matched with role. So failed. No ORMs are enabled for testing. I need to make sure to go to my, well, this is in my case for Rockstack. So I want to test Prisma first. Okay, so, well, I need to go one by one and make sure that these tests that GPT generated are correct. but it should be like, for example, get all should get all roles. If I, well, in this case, I have Prisma for seeding the database for both Prisma and Drizzle tests. That's because Prisma makes it so convenient to update data. So even though you're not gonna use Prisma, you can still depend on as a depth dependency for Prisma for creating these mock data, because now you can test it. For example, here Prisma is creating the rows, but then you're actually testing your interface, and this interface could be implementing Drizzle. Let me show you. If I turn off Prisma tests and go to Drizzle, it will now test all my Drizzle implementations. And you can see everything says method not implemented. So I can, with the help of GPT or Claude, I can put it now implement this Drizzle. Well, I don't need to be too perfect on the instructions. And I'm gonna copy this and paste it and run it. And it should work. I guess not on the first try. Like for example, well, it looks good. Yeah, because I'm supposed to use .query instead of .select from, because it's much more convenient to use query, because this way you can include things like here with, similar to how Prisma does it with include. And it's doing the last two. So now we can copy this and paste it and fix whatever it has an error. Okay, why is it depending on role user? Let's go function by function. Role with relations. Okay, let's take a look at this. That depends on permissions and it contains a permission. So with permissions, yeah, I don't like this way of doing it. So I'm gonna test it like this, with permissions and then with permission to true. Okay, so I'm just gonna remove this helper and fix this other one with permissions that contains a permission. And in this case, it's not returning the correct DTO because users are required on this DTO. So it's with permissions, but also with users. Users with user. Okay, it works with permission. Okay, select max. Max order result, it's an unknown. So let's check if it contains items. If it doesn't contain anything, the next order is gonna be 1. Otherwise, we're gonna return this is unknown. So let's return the parsing of this +1. Well, but this seems like a service function. I'm not sure if this should be on this database specific. But anyway, I'm gonna stop my tests. My Mac is starting to freeze a little bit, so give me a second. I'm gonna. Okay, I'm back. The problem is that I wasn't charging my computer and it started to get slow. Where was I? I was going to convert this as a number and then return the max order +1. Now, for creating in Drizzle implementations, I need to import this from Qt because Drizzle doesn't, well, there must be a way to auto-generate IDs. But since I'm using Qt as my way of handling the IDs, your backend is the one that is going to be responsible for creating that on the Drizzle implementation. And I know that created add is also manually created and also updated add. So yeah, if I save this Drizzle and run it again, let's see if it works. Okay, it passed at first try. And yeah, that's it, because if I don't know, comment this update just to make sure that the tests are not false positives, we can see that on this specific update test, it expected to be then updated, and it wasn't. So this is my way of migrating role by role and decoupling your data access calls from whatever ORM and then support new ones. And I'm gonna do this for all the models. Currently, I already have for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. For 8, but total models are like 20, I think. So if this video took around 30 minutes, it should be 20 minus 8, 6 hours. Yeah, it should be done in 2 days, and then I can move on to something else. And of course, remember, I always check if my function depends on anything other than the database. Like in the case of roles service, we have functions that depend on cache. This way, I know when to call create roles that affect the cache and when to call just db role.create. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed this, and let me know if you want to see more videos like this, or if I should stream and do all the models real time, or if I should do this for every model. No, I don't think that's a good idea. I just wanted to show you how I'm migrating away from Prisma, even though Prisma, in my opinion, is the best ORM out there.